In the medieval world, a crusade was supposed to be simple. You took the cross, you marched east, you reached Jerusalem, or you died trying. This one did neither. It began with prayer and ended in silence. With faith so absolute it ignored reason, geography, and reality itself. Tens of thousands set out, convinced they were chosen by God to do what armies had failed to accomplish. They never reached the Holy Land. Most never reached any battlefield at all. And by the time it was over, an entire generation had vanished into hunger, slavery, disease, and the indifference of the world they passed through. No great victory marked its end. No glorious defeat. Only disappearance. Europe in the early 13th century was a place shaped by belief. Religion was not a private matter. It governed politics, war, law, and identity. To be Christian was to belong to a cosmic struggle between salvation and damnation. For decades, crusades had been called to reclaim Jerusalem. Knights marched east under papal banners. Kings pledged armies. Thousands died, and thousands more returned broken. But Jerusalem remained out of reach. Repeated failures bred desperation. And desperation in medieval Europe often took the form of faith unrestrained by authority. The idea spread quietly at first, not through kings or popes, but through whispers, through sermons in village squares, through visions claimed by shepherds, peasants, and children. God, they said, had changed his strategy. The Holy Land would not be liberated by armored knights and professional soldiers. It would be reclaimed by the pure of heart, by those untouched by sin, by children. The logic was simple and terrifying. The failures of past crusades proved that violence and ambition had corrupted the cause. Only innocence could succeed where steel had failed. This was not an official doctrine. No pope proclaimed it. No king endorsed it. And yet the idea spread faster than any royal decree ever had. Children began to leave their homes. At first, parents thought it was a game, a phase, a moment of religious enthusiasm, but then more left, and more. Entire villages watched as their sons and daughters disappeared down the road, carrying crosses made of wood and scraps of cloth. Some were barely old enough to speak. They had no weapons, no armor, no supplies, only belief. They marched south, convinced the sea itself would part for them, just as it had for Moses. God would provide ships. God would guide them. God would protect them. Adults followed too, not as leaders, but as believers swept up by the same promise. The movement grew into massive columns of humanity stretching across roads and fields. No one was in charge. There was no command structure, no supply chain, no strategy, only faith. As the crowds moved through towns and cities, reactions varied. Some welcomed them as saints in motion. Others saw them as dangerous lunatics. Food was scarce. Disease spread quickly. Children collapsed from exhaustion. Still, the march continued. The crusade was supposed to end in Jerusalem, but it never even reached the sea. Long before the Mediterranean came into view, reality intervened. Hunger was the first enemy. Medieval Europe lived on thin margins. A single bad harvest could mean famine. Tens of thousands of extra mouths moving through the countryside was a disaster waiting to happen. Villages ran out of food. Tempers flared. Theft became common. Faith did not fill empty stomachs. Disease followed. Crowded together, walking barefoot for weeks, children fell ill. Fevers spread. Dysentery ravaged camps. Bodies were buried hastily or left behind. The march slowed. Then came the predators. Merchants, smugglers, and opportunists recognized what was happening long before authorities did. This was not an army. It was a moving mass of vulnerable people. Some offered help, others offered lies, promises of ships, promises of food, promises of safe passage. Those who trusted them vanished. Entire groups were led away from the main columns and never seen again. Some were sold into slavery. Others were abandoned in remote areas to die. A few may have reached foreign ports, only to be trapped by debts they could never repay. The Crusade fractured. What had once been a unified movement splintered into countless wandering groups, each following its own rumors, visions, and hopes. Some turned back, many could not. Those who reached the coast found no miracle waiting for them. The sea did not part. No ships appeared. The Mediterranean was not a gateway, it was a wall. The Crusade had reached its furthest point, and it was nowhere near the Holy Land. With nowhere to go, the survivors scattered. Some attempted to settle. Others tried to return home, only to find their villages gone, their families moved on, or their land claimed by others. Many simply disappeared into history. The Church, confronted with the aftermath, did not celebrate the Crusade. It distanced itself from it. No official recognition was given. No martyrs were declared. The Crusade that had never reached Jerusalem was quietly erased. And that may be the most unsettling part. Medieval Europe recorded battles obsessively. Kings, popes, and wars filled chronicles and sermons. But this crusade, arguably one of the largest popular religious movements of the era, was treated like an embarrassment. Too chaotic, too uncontrollable, too damning. It revealed a dangerous truth. Faith could mobilize masses without authority, and once unleashed, it could not be contained. Historians debate what to call it. Some argue it was never truly a crusade at all. Others insist it represented the purest expression of crusading ideology, belief stripped of politics. But labels do not change what happened. Children left their homes believing they would walk to Jerusalem. They did not. They walked into exploitation, starvation, and oblivion. No great battle ended their journey. No enemy army stopped them. They were undone by geography, hunger, and the harsh reality of a world that does not bend to belief. The tragedy of the crusade that never reached the Holy Land is not just in its failure, but in its sincerity. These were not mercenaries, not adventurers, not conquerors. They were believers. And belief, when untethered from reality, can be just as destructive as violence. Today, there are no monuments marking their path, no mass graves with names, no final resting place that can be visited and remembered. Their crusade did not fail in a single moment. It faded. 1,000 small endings, 1,000 quiet disappearances. And history moved on. The Holy Land remained where it was. Empires rose and fell, borders changed. But the children who marched south never returned as they left. They are remembered not for what they achieved, but for how completely they vanished. A crusade without a destination. A journey without an ending. A warning written not in blood, but in absence.